While returning to Hitogashima, Shinpei dreams of a moment with Ushio, who wonders how many years has it been since he last came to the island. Before going, Ushio tells him to find her and protect Mio. Attempting to stop Ushio, Shinpei tries to reach her, but ends up bumping into a woman. Stepping on the island, Shinpei is greeted by a speeding Mio on a bike, Ushio's little sister. She is unable to stop and ends up falling in the water. At the funeral, Shinpei recalls that he lost his parents 10 years ago and was taken by Kofuna family, making Ushio not only a childhood friend but family too. So hugs Shinpei and cries, explaining that Ushio tried saving a kid but ended up drowning. So points out at Shiori Kobayakawa, stating it's her that Ushio saved, but the girl hasn't spoken since then. That night, Shinpei prepares curry. As they eat, a police officer notices Mio standing outside of the house and looking at it. After dinner, So calls Shinpei and explains that his father didn't perform an autopsy, but was there just for the police's inquest. However, they found marks on Ushio's neck, similar to strangling, making it possible that Ushio was killed. Mio then knocks on Shinpei's door and gives him Ushio's necklace. The next day, Alan reopens his dinner. A drunk customer, Nakamura, asks Shinpei if he found a woman with glasses and large bust he was looking for. Tetsu, the only police officer on the island, enters the dinner. Mio wonders why he didn't came this morning for breakfast as usual. Tetsu explains that all Kobayakawa family had vanished. Hearing that, Mio runs outside and Shinpei goes after her. Shinpei finally catches up to Mio. She tells him that Shiori was a bit weird lately. Mio explains that around a week before that, Shiori said she saw a girl who looked just like Shiori herself. Then Shiori felt being watched each day. A man interrupts them, asking if that ain't the shadow. Mio tells Shinpei the man is Nezu, a hunter. Nezu states it's the shadow sickness, a disease endemic to this island, and it used to be quite common before the war. If you were taken by the shadow of sickness, you start seeing your shadow, and all those who saw it died killed by it. The shadow then pretends to be the one it killed and kills the remaining family. Before leaving, Nezu says that his grandpa told him that the afflicted would go to Hiruko's shrine to be cleansed. 3 days before Ushio died, while picking up trash with Ushio and others, Ushio saw her shadow and pointed it for Mio to see. Then the shadow disappeared before their eyes. Shinpei suggests they go see Hiruko's shrine. At the shrine, Shinpei tries to open the door, but it's locked. Mio then looks at the forest and states she saw Shiori and makes Shinpei run with her after Shiori. Shinpei ends up finding the woman with glasses he bumped into on the boat, bleeding from a gun wound. The woman tells Shinpei to listen, but before she can finish, she gets shot in the head. Shinpei then turns to see Mio holding a gun and having another Mio as hostage. She then pulls the trigger and kills Mio, and then shoots Shinpei in the head too. Shinpei then awakens at the boat heading Hitogashima and bumps into the same woman as before and gets slapped again. Shinpei recalls it's the woman from the forest. Shinpei looks at his phone and sees it's July 22nd, but recalls going to Hiruko on 23rd with Mio. Stepping on the island, Shinpei feels he had already experienced this moment. Mio then arrives greeting him and falls in the water in the same way, with Shinpei noticing the bike brake wire is cut. Shinpei then heads to Ushio's funeral. As he gets flashes of what is going to happen, he starts to believe that shadows do exist. After cooking curry, Shinpei decides to go out. He then overhears the police officer Tetsu, who sees Mio standing in front of the house. Mio then kills Tetsu, stabbing him multiple times with a kitchen knife, making him realize that isn't Mio, but a shadow. A flash then occurs and a shadow comes out of Shadow Mio's shadow, which then transforms into Tetsu. In that moment, So calls Shinpei. Mio hears it, finds Shinpei, and stabs him in the neck. Shinpei then starts floating above his body. He's then being transported elsewhere, but as he travels, he hears Ushio's voice, who tells him to be careful and protect Mio. Shinpei then awakens on July 22nd as he steps on Hitogashima. Knowing that Mio will fall into the water, he stands in front of the bike, stopping her. Elsewhere, Hizuru, the woman with the glasses, records herself while hanging upside down from a tree. That evening, Shinpei calls Tetsu, informing him of a fight and sending him elsewhere so that he doesn't encounter Shadow Mio. Shinpei sets his phone recording outside of the house in order to film Shadow Mio. Shinpei notices his right eye has a different color, but isn't aware when it happened. In the morning, Shinpei retrieves his phone. He then heads to Mio's room and shows her the recording. Mio states they should talk with Shiori as she saw her shadow too. Shinpei goes to Koa Mart, but it's closed. Shiomi appears and finds it strange. So they enter Kobayakawa house, but there is no one around. Shinpei notices black stains left. He decides to check the second floor for Shiori. Going there, he tries to turn on the lights, but notices a flash behind him. Suddenly, Shiori appears and wonders why is he staring at her. Shinpei then realizes that Shiori is his shadow, and she was at the funeral. As Xiaomi comes, Shiori decides to leave. Shinpei figures that he can save the woman with glasses this time and starts looking for her at various inns. Shinpei then returns to Kofuna's diner, where Tetsu comes and hands a phone to Shinpei, and Mio recognizes it as Ushio's. Tetsu explains that Ushio came a day before she died and gave him the phone, telling to give it to Shinpei if something were to happen to her. So comes and Shinpei decides to tell him everything, and that Mio is the next target. So wonders if they can recognize who is his shadow, but Shinpei isn't aware of any way. Mio suggests they go to Haruko, but recalling that Shadow Mio is there, Shinpei wants to avoid it and convinces them to go tomorrow. Tokiko, So and Mio come to pick Shinpei up for the festival. During the festival, Shinpei then sees Ushio in the crowd and runs after her. He follows her to the beach and sees her standing in the water. She then runs at him and hugs him while being surprised he came back. Shinpei wonders what she is doing there and if she remembers what happened. She then recalls being underwater and realizes she indeed died. Shinpei realizes that Ushio doesn't think she's his shadow and goes after her at the festival. He tells her to stay hidden until the festival is over, as everyone believes she is dead and can't meet her friends. Shinpei joins Mio and the rest. A disguised Ushio then appears. Everyone quickly recognizes her. However, Mio states it's not Ushio, but a monster, and warns Shinpei to stay away from her as she is his shadow. Shinpei refuses and grabs Ushio, causing her pain. As a shadow comes out of Shinpei, everyone realizes that Shinpei is a shadow too. About 10 minutes earlier, while running towards the shrine, Shinpei encounters Shadow Mio, who had just killed someone. Shadow Mio then grabs and throws Shinpei. A shadow Shinpei then appears and wonders how many times has Shinpei died and creates a flash. Shinpei realizes that the flash at Shiori's house made a copy of him and all of his memories until then, but this new flash will now update and learn everything. Shadow Shinpei tells Mio to take his phone and to send others to get Ushio. In that moment, Hizuru appears and shoots Mio in the head. Shinpei recognizes her as the woman from the boat, but then notices that Mio is gone. Mio had turned into a shadow on the ground and slides behind Hizuru. She then comes out of the shadow and attempts to stab Hizuru. However, Hizuru dodges and points the gun at Mio's shadow on the ground and shoots it. Mio is surprised she managed to dodge that, and due to the gunshot, she falls apart and disappears. Hizuru explains that she hasn't been on the island since she was a kid and introduces her as Ryunosuke and had come to save Shinpei. Shinpei wonders if she can differ humans from shadows, and Hizuru explains that above the shadow is just a lump of flesh in human shape, and they don't like when someone stands on their shadow. A flash occurs on top of the hill and Shinpei requests Hizuru's help as he wants to save Mio. He runs up the stairs and finds Tokiko, who starts crying and is then killed by a shadow. The shadow states the hour of 9 is approaching and the festival is over, revealing a big pile of dead humans behind it. Shinpei sees Shadow So, who had hit So in the head with an axe as he was protecting Mio. Shadow So then proceeds to attack Mio, but Hizuru blows his hands with a shotgun. The main shadow then creates a female shadow from itself, who points a gun at Hizuru. Hizuru then sees the gun shooting and her dying and quickly dodges, but gets shot in the arm and guesses that Shadow is the parent. The shadow then grabs Shinpei, looking at its right eye, and he realizes it must be the eye their mother lost long ago. Ushio awakens and tries to get free from Shadow Shinpei. Shinpei struggles to get to Mio, but before he is able to reach her, she gets consumed along with the rest of the dead bodies. The parent Shadow offers them as meal and asks their mother to grant him the last of her strength. Mother then appears floating in the air in a shining red light. The parent Shadow starts spreading across the island and consume anyone it touches. At Hishigata Hospital, Sato is with a shadow in a wheelchair. Looking at the red light, he comments that she had recovered after consuming 1,000 humans. Shinpei tells Hizuru to shoot him in the head. Shinpei tells Hizuru to shoot him in the head, saying that no matter how many times he dies, he will start over. The parent Shadow prepares to consume him as well, but Ushio comes and punches him. Hizuru then shoots Shinpei in the head. Shinpei then finds himself floating in air. He sees the island is engulfed in shadow and a red girl, who then notices him as well. Shinpei then clearly hears Ushio, who tells him that his power has a limit and that everyone dies at the festival. Shinpei returns to July 22nd. Later, Shinpei starts thinking about the situation and what Ushio told him. He realizes that each time his starting point moves ahead and eventually will reach a point where Mio and the rest will start dying and he will never be able to save them. Meanwhile, Ushio awakens at the beach. Arriving on Hitogashima, Hizuru sees a notification about Ushio's funeral. She decides to attend it. Hizuru realizes that the boy sitting in front of her on the boat was Shinpei, and she decides to avoid him for now. Alan follows her and tells Hizuru about Ushio's marks on the neck. Hizuru asks if they checked under her nails for blood or skin, but Alan says they didn't check. Alan wonders if this case reminds Hizuru of Ryunosuke's death 14 years ago. Hizuru then returns to Ushio's coffin and opens it to check her neck. She asks to dress the body and Alan tells her it was a nurse from the Ishigata clinic. Hizuru starts leaving. Asako recognizes Hizuru, an old friend of her. Asako explains that Ushio saved her daughter Shiori during the accident. However, Hizuru notices that Asako's shadow was avoiding her foot. Hizuru reveals to Nezu that the whole Kobayakawa family are shadows. As they are growing in numbers, Nezu states that one of them has the ability to produce more shadows. Hizuru gives Nezu her second phone and tells him to contact her if it rings. Later, Alan gives Shinpei a note that Hizuru gave him. Shinpei recognizes the text as being a code from her book. After cracking it, Shinpei calls the phone number and Nezu picks up. After Shinpei introduces himself, Nezu does the same and states he's an acquaintance to Hizuru. After confirming Shinpei isn't a shadow, Nezu invites him to the 4th battery. Hizuru guesses that Shinpei is a time traveler and he confirms. Hizuru explains that she met his shadow 14 years ago and it killed her family. However, she can't tell him more as if the shadows copy Shinpei, they will learn her secret. Nezu explains that once your shadow is killed, they can't copy you anymore. Nezu himself has this immunity and they can never copy him again. Hizuru tells Shinpei that she will help him and wonders about his plan. Shinpei explains their time limit is 54 hours, but first wants to help Mio and take out her shadow. Hizuru agrees, but states that their first problem is Shiori's family. As he saw Shiori's shadow at the festival, this means Hizuru would fail to eliminate her and wishes to come with her. In front of Kobe Mart, Hizuru turns into Ryunosuke and listens to Shinpei's and Hizuru's earlier conversation. Nezu explains that Ryunosuke doesn't have Hizuru's memories. As Ryunosuke enters the house, he immediately smashes Asako's head with hammer. Tatsuo then attacks Ryunosuke, but he smashes his head too. Ryunosuke gets a glimpse of his death and then avoids Asako's attack and proceeds smashing her shadow and killing her. Shinpei wonders if Hizuru has dual personality, but Nezu states he is close but not quite. Nezu explains he was Hizuru's twin brother, but she found him dead 14 years ago. He had bite marks all over his body, making people think it was wild dogs, but the bites were distraction for the strangle marks on his neck. Meanwhile, Hizuru smashes Shiori's shadow. Shiori takes damage but manages to separate part of her shadow surrounding the hammer and survives with injuries. Shiori escapes on the 3rd floor. Ryunosuke enters Shiori's room and texts Nezu that she managed to escape from the window. Nezu then starts shooting her with his nail gun. Shinpei comes out and charges at Shiori and takes her to the ground. Nezu shoots 3 nails at her shadow and tells Shinpei it's safe to let her, since piercing a shadow 3 times, it stops them from moving. Shinpei asks her what their goal is. Shiori states the end is coming this summer and she is gathering her family and leaving. Ryunosuke smashes Shiori and kills her. Back at home, while Shinpei is making curry, Ushio appears behind him. Shinpei is surprised and comments that she should have appeared on 24th at the festival. Ushio wonders how he knows that and explains that some shadow-like monsters would appear at the festival and eat everyone. Once inside his room, Shinpei wonders why Shadow Ushio managed to loop with him and asks her from where she came. Ushio explains she walked from Emoto Beach, where she woke up. Ushio tells him that she wants to stop the monsters and both agree to work together to prevent the events at the festival. Shinpei wonders if Ushio can copy people, but Ushio isn't able to. Meanwhile, a shadow entered the house. Mio comes to Shinpei's room and Ushio hides under the blanket. After taking the empty dishes, Mio leaves but returns in a few seconds, and Shinpei realizes it's a shadow as she's in her school uniform. Shadow Mio then attempts to stab him, but Ushio protects him and takes the hit. Ushio then pushes Mio back, but she enters her shadow and comes out and stabs Ushio's shadow, wounding her. Shinpei realizes he can't win and opens the curtains and challenges Mio. In that moment, Nezu blows her head through the window. Shinpei drops on his knees and stabs Mio's shadow. Ryunosuke enters Shinpei's room, and as he is about to smash Ushio's head, Shinpei protects her with his body, stopping Ryunosuke. Hizuru then realizes Ushio's voice is the same as the message she received that led her to the island and decides to help her. Hizuru then plays her the message, in which Ushio states that the shadows will kill everyone at the festival, requesting Hizuru's help and that the only one who can stop them is Shinpei. However, Ushio has no memories of it too. Shinpei proceeds doing what he did on 23rd and goes to work at the restaurant. He receives Ushio's phone from Tetsu and so comes to the restaurant. Shinpei and Ushio then tell him everything. Shinpei gives her phone. As she looks at it, she sees there is a video from 20th in the morning, the day she died. In the video, she calls her shadow, and the two Ushio stand to each other. Ushio explains that her shadow isn't an evil one. Shadow Ushio tells him that she now remembers everything, including her powers. She then offers them to replay the past from her memory data and show them what happened on the private beach on July 21st. Ushio asks Shadow Ushio if she can become her shell necklace, and Shadow Ushio turns into it. While Mio and Akari are going away, Shiori ended in the water and is drowning. Ushio jumps in the water and swims to Shiori, who is being dragged deeper underwater by Shadow Shiori. Shadow Ushio turns back to her Ushio form and slashes Shadow Shiori's arm, but Shadow Shiori's arm is still on her and surrounds them with shadow arms. Ushio pulls Shadow Shiori out of them, but Shadow Shiori starts strangling her. Ushio tells Shadow Ushio to continue to save Shiori. Moments later, Shadow Shiori catches up to Shadow Ushio and defeats her, erases Shiori, and then acts unconscious for Mio and So to save her. Shadow Shiori, who is carried by Mio, then grabs Shinpei's arm, stating she found him. Shinpei is surprised as this was a recording and they couldn't interact with others. Shadow Shiori then turns into Haine, stating she was looking for him for quite some time. Shadow Ushio tells him that this isn't part of her memory. Shadow Ushio stops the replay and they return to the beach, but sees that Shinpei has a mark on his arm where Haine grabbed him. Shinpei wishes to go to the old clinic, So agrees to come along. As they reach the clinic, Shinpei asks Ushio if she senses any shadows, but she denies. They enter the old clinic and start looking around. So then finds an old weird wood statue as holding a fish in his left arm. Shinpei then realizes the wood statue is Haruko. Shinpei calls Ushio and asks her to go through a small gap in the wall. Once on the other side, Ushio sees a keyhole and guesses it's a door. Shinpei calls her back, and as she scans the statue, she attempts to copy with a string of her hair the thing inside, which ends up being a key. With it, Ushio opens the secret door and they see a tunnel leading below, but Ushio warns them that she senses a presence of a shadow down there. Shinpei guesses no one has been here since decades and this is a path only shadows use. Ushio feels the direction of the shadow. Heading towards the shadow, Shinpei sees a baby-like shadow which is missing its top half of the head. Shinpei prepares to pin it with a nail gun. As he gets a bit closer, the shadow smells him out. The shadow then escapes past Shinpei, who misses with his nail gun. Shinpei manages to calm himself down and then hits the shadow 3 times with the nail gun, making it unable to move. So then throws it at Ushio, who then kills it. Continuing, So wonders if Ushio can copy the nail gun. Shinpei states they tried and she did, but the copied machines won't work until the original is erased. They hear gunfire and then reach a natural cave. Multiple baby-like shadows then attack them. Having a bad feeling, Hizuru decides to go into the city sewers and Nezu follows her. Meanwhile, Shinpei, Ushio, and So are trying to escape from the baby-like shadows. Shinpei notices that the shadows are only targeting Ushio. So uses spray and a lighter to keep the shadows away. While going in the sewers, Hizuru had switched to Ryunosuke, who kills a shadow and feels that they are getting closer to their nest. Mio tries calling Shinpei and So, but neither is picking their phones. A shadowy Shiori then calls her, telling her that Shinpei is there. As she runs towards her, she encounters Tetsu. They see the manhole is open and they both go inside. Shinpei and the rest manage to escape the shadows. Ushio then erases her arm to stop the pain. Suddenly, Tokiko appears with 2 baby-like shadows, telling them to turn slowly and not do anything strange or Ushio will die. Ryunosuke and Nezu reach a dead end with metal bars blocking the way. Ryunosuke then hears something and they hide. Tetsu and Mio then approach. They see Shiori behind the metal bars, who then flashes and makes the bars disappear, allowing them to proceed. As Tokiko gets closer, Shinpei shoots at her shadow, but Tokiko just laughs. Ushio tells Shinpei that Tokiko isn't a shadow. Tokiko leads them to Haruko. Ryunosuke and Nezu proceed and reach the cave. Shiori appears and reveals that she knows Ryunosuke's full name. That makes Ryunosuke realize this is Haine, who uses Shiori's memories. The shadow parent appears and wants to know where is the body that stole Mother's right eye. Nezu states they should run as they are the ones being hunted, and that this isn't a shadow, a human. Shiori warns the shadow that Ryunosuke is shifted, about 2 seconds ahead. The shadow then shoots at Ryunosuke, but Nezu jumps in and takes the bullet. He then proceeds shooting at Ryunosuke, who manages to escape, but also gets shot. Getting closer, Shinpei and the rest hear a rumble, and Tokiko explains it's Haruko's stomach. Tokiko then takes them to a large shadow that reaches the ceiling, and at its base is Haine, who states it's 9 o'clock and time to eat. Tokiko explains that the appearance of Haruko is the first human she copied Haine and prefers to be called by that name. She is the god of Hitogashima and mother of shadows. Hina turns to Shiori and asks Shinpei how many times have they met. Shinpei realizes she was the one that killed Oshio and has been in front of him the entire time. Tokiko calls in Neguro, a nurse that works at their clinic. Tokiko explains that on average 4 people die on Hitogashima every year, and they feed the dead to Hina. Her family have been doing it as long as it existed. Neguro brings 2 coffins, and one of them is Ushio. Tokiko also tells So that their mother wasn't cured and their father asked Hina to turn her into a shadow so she can live. Hina proceeds and flashes to eat the body inside the other coffin. Shinpei knows that shadows can't move for a few seconds while they scan. As Hina prepares to scan Ushio, Shinpei asks Shadow Ushio to print it now. She then prints a nail gun in his hands and he shoots at the baby-like shadows. Shadow Ushio then jumps in and takes Ushio's body and scans her to regenerate her arm. Hina causes Shadow Neguro to transform into more muscular form and go after Shinpei, but Ushio jumps in and kills her. Shinpei gets close to Hina and prepares to shoot her, but the nail gun and his fingers get cut. The Shadow Parent tells Hina that he will take Ushio's body back and shows he has Mio. Tokiko was angry as they promised to not touch Mio. A Shadow shoots at Tokiko, but So gets in front and takes the bullet. The Shadow then shoots Tokiko. Hina orders Ushio to come slowly. Shinpei tells her to eat him since she wants to eat humans, but Hina rips his right eye, but it returns to him, making Hina realize it's impossible to take his power. The Shadow then crushes Mio's skull, killing her. The Shadow intends to keep Shinpei there until tomorrow ends. Tetsu shows up, and a moment later, Hizuru blows the Shadow's head, freeing Shinpei. She knows she has one more shot and shoots at Shinpei, but the Shadow creates a shield blocking the bullet and also shoots at Hizuru, hitting her in the head and killing her. Shinpei thanks Hizuru and Tetsu, revealing he had a bottle of poison, which he drank already. Hina tells the Shadow to look at Ushio, as she started to reverse her corrosion. The Shadow attempts to kill Ushio, but Shinpei takes her and starts looping back with her. Shinpei loops back at the moment he meets Hizuru and Nezu. Hizuru guesses he is a time traveler. In that moment, Ushio also materializes next to Shinpei. After telling her what happened, they all decide to work together. As they shake hands, Ushio shows Hizuru and Nezu her memories. Nezu states that if Shiri is part of Hiruko, no matter how many times they kill her, she won't die as Shiri is only a small part of Hiruko's shadow. Ushio suggests they capture Shiri like last time. Once they do, Ushio will try to erase her. The group prepares to attack the Kobayakawas and Hizuru switches to Ryunosuke. Ryunosuke enters and attacks Asako. Outside, the group prepares for a message from Ryunosuke. However, they are surprised when they see Ryunosuke flying through the window. Ryunosuke tells them to run. In that moment, the 4-armed Shadow smashes Ryunosuke's head with his hammer. The Shadow then surrounds Shinpei and is about to capture him, but Ushio cuts Shinpei's head. As the Shadow is about to smash her, Shinpei's loop is activated and Ushio vanishes with Shinpei. While looping, Ushio tells Shinpei that after scanning the Shadow, it was empty and there was no data, but had the same smell as Hina. Shinpei returns around their home. He then sees 2 people and recognizes one of them being Hizuru. He decides to go after them, but can't interact with anything physical. Shinpei sees that this is 14 years ago. He even sees his parents there. Shinpei is then moved to Hishigata's old clinic in the mountain. Moments later, Hina shows up and Hizuru greets her. The 2 continue to spend time together and play games. Hizuru meets Nezu, who warns her it's dangerous as there are snakes in the forest. Ryunosuke heads towards the clinic to bring some water to Hizuru. On his way, he sees Hina, who was bloody and eating a small animal. Later, Hizuru sees a flash and upon checking it, she finds Hina over the dead Ryunosuke. Hina comes back to her sense and turns into Ryunosuke. As she yells, a flash occurs and her eye is blown away. Hizuru covers her left eye, but her right is exposed to the light. Feeling pain, Hina then retreats in her shadow. 2 stray, incomplete shadows appear, looking like a mother and child. The child's shadow runs towards Hizuru, but Nezu appears and attacks it. A flash occurs and the mother shadow turns into Nezu. Shadow Nezu then attacks Nezu and injures his eye. Hizuru hears her brother and then takes Nezu and jumps away, and Ryunosuke had taken control over Hizuru. Shadow Nezu comes behind Ryunosuke, but he predicts it and dodges, and throws Nezu to the ground and kills him. Sometime after the incident, Hizuru decides to leave the island. As she leaves, Hizuru sees Hina, who tells her she is letting her go because they were friends. Shinpei loops back to them heading towards the Kobayakawas and tells Ryunosuke they shouldn't go. Meanwhile, Nezu is up a hill, observing and wondering from where the shadows will come. A moment later, Shadow Mio stabs him in the head, killing him. While Shinpei thanks everyone for joining him, a blink occurs and he finds himself earlier at home. Ushio and Mio come and explain that he was shot by a sniper rifle. Mio was surprised as they wanted Shinpei alive, but Shinpei explains that he can loop one more time. Hizuru notes that if he dies, it will be his permanent death and the world will be what Heine sees. Shinpei is waiting for Heine outside. She arrives with Shida and other shadows. They send Mio's shadow, but before she can attack Shinpei, Ushio appears from his wristwatch and takes him and runs away. Nezu shoots at Shida's shadow, however it has no effect, making him wonder if Shida is invincible. Nezu proceeds to shoot out and kill regular shadows. Shinpei and Ushio pass a corridor, where they leave Hizuru to take care of the following them shadows. Mio's shadow heads towards Nezu, but Tokiko summons two baby-like shadows, who push Mio away. Ryunosuke fights the shadows. Ryunosuke then foresees Shida shooting Shinpei behind him and blocks the shot with his body. Haida knew that Ryunosuke will cover, which makes him realize that Heine Aslo has the sight and sees movements 2 seconds in the future. Shida fails to kill Ryunosuke as Nezu shoots at him, allowing Ryunosuke to escape. Surprised to see Tokiko fighting Shadow Mio, Heine orders the shadows that Tokiko isn't their master and to kill her. However, the shadows ignore the order and smash Mio, making Heine realize her connection to the stray shadow has been severed by Ushio. Angry, Heine jumps on Shida, merging him with the remaining shadows and giving him a spider-like look. Shida and Heine reach the school's sport hall. Their Ushio reveals that her hair is above them and turns it into gasoline, which then Shinpei fires up. The shadows start burning, but Heine jumps on the ceiling with a Sako. Tetsu shoots at her, but as she turns towards him, his gun disappears and appears in Shinpei's hands. He then shoots Heine's shadow and injures her. Ushio then grabs Heine's hand, who is in Shiri's form. Distracted, Shida grabs Ushio and pulls her into the fire, while also shooting Shinpei. Ushio's necklace appears behind Shida and turns to Ushio, who then punches Shida from behind and pierces his chest. Ushio then starts erasing Shida, and as he starts to fall apart, a human hand comes out of him. Heine then goes crazy, taking out all the oxygen and putting out the fire. The windows then burst open and air enters the hall. Heine takes Shida and runs away. Ushio wonders about Shinpei as he was shot, but Shinpei reveals he made a bulletproof vest. The group has captured Shadow Mio and asks Ushio to turn her into an ally. They head to a secret hallway and Tokiko explains it leads to Hiruko's cave and they are using it to bring dead bodies to her. Eventually, they find So's mother choking Sato. Ushio rushes in and hacks So's mother, freeing her from Heine's control. Sato reveals that Heine tries to return to her hometown in the deep ocean, and she intended to bring shadows with her, the family she handpicked. Sato then opens a safe. Inside are patient records with the people that ended up being food for Heine. Shinpei's parents are on the list too. Shinpei wonders if Sato knows Shida's real identity and Sato confirms. Sato gives a photo to Shinpei and states Shida is her guardian and the first child she gave birth to, Shidehiko Hishigata, the founder of the Hishigata Clinic. The next day, Shinpei states that it's time to meet with Masahito Karakuri. Shinpei then goes to the Hiruko Shrine, where he finds Masahito. While waiting for Masahito to bring drinks, Shinpei confirms with Ushio that there are no shadows nearby and Masahito isn't a shadow. Shinpei reveals he learned the legend of Hiruko. Shinpei states you can look at Hiruko as a being from space, and while it was adrift, it probably copied and transformed into other things nearby. It likely arrived on Earth as a meteorite and fell into the ocean. It started copying things from the ocean and eventually transformed into a whale 300 years ago and somehow washed ashore on this island. As the villagers gathered, a girl approached the whale and it copied the girl, starting the shadow of sickness. Masahito laughs, but Shinpei tosses photos at Masahito and asks should he call him Shidehiko Hishigata. Shinpei then points his gun at Masahito and states he is Shida. He then tells Masahito to look at the other picture, which Dr. Hishigata's father took 40 years ago. On the picture, it's Heine with Masahito and a baby, which wasn't a shadow, but birthed from Heine's flesh and blood body. Heine copies Shidehiko's personality and memories and transfer them into the child, thus restoring his youth. Shidehiko then continued being reborn over and over by Heine, allowing him to live for 300 years. Ushio, unable to stand it anymore, comes out and slashes and kills Masahito. Another Masahito appears and stabs Ushio's shadow and slashes her with a spear. Shinpei loses it and shoots at Masahito 3 times. A black mud surrounds Masahito, turning him to Shida. He then throws the spear at Shinpei and hits him in the chest. Shida then notes that with Ushio's death, he can live only with despair and regret now. Shinpei then awakens and starts to cry. Shinpei calls Hizuru and informs her that Ushio is dead and they need to regroup at the northeastern island of Torajima, which can only be accessed during low tide. However, it's a shadow Shinpei with Masahito who called Hizuru. Shinpei returns to Kofuna's restaurant, but Alan tells him that So and Mio went to meet with him 30 minutes ago. Shinpei hears a voice and checks his room to see Shadow Mio pinned to the ground. Shadow Mio shares her memory and Shinpei sees that Mio pinned her since she feared her hacking may be undone since Ushio died. Shinpei receives a call from Hizuru's phone, but it's Haine, transformed as him. She tells him that they are at Torajima while Mio is at Alan's garden and it's his choice who he wants to save. About 10 minutes earlier, Mio and So go to Alan's garden and they see Masahito there. Masahito then transforms into Shida. At the same time, Hizuru's group is looking at Torajima. Hizuru decides to go alone on the island and asks Nezu if he can cover her with his rifle. Ryunosuke then goes to Torajima and sees Shinpei, but feels Haine's presence. Masahito appears behind her, but Ryunosuke manages to dodge the spear. Masahito then shows a black ball, stating it's mud, a ball of former shadows. The mud reacts to his will and changes its form, turning him into Shida. Shida then attacks Ryunosuke. While fighting, Shida manages to break Ryunosuke's hammer, but he takes Shida's spear and starts cutting and piercing him numerous times. However, that has no effect on Shida, as he just regenerates. She notes that if Shida's armor is nobody, then it's an empty void that Ryunosuke can invade. She touches Shida's head and sends Ryunosuke, who then takes part of Shida's armor and forms his own shadow and reveals Masahito. Hizuru has exceeded her body limit and starts to fall, but Tokiko then comes and grabs her and attacks with the stray shadow. Meanwhile, Shinpei and Shadow Mio face Masahito. Masahito tells Mio to kill Shinpei so he can loop or they will be late. However, Mio then goes and beheads Masahito, who then states they will see each other in the next loop. Mio and So are then eaten by Haine and Shadow Mio feels it and tells Shinpei that Mio just died. Shinpei then tells her to scan Masahito to search his memories. She does, but states he has no memories and is empty. Mio then feels something and calls Shinpei to follow her. They find barely alive Tokiko. As she dies, Tokiko tells Shinpei to go to Torajima and save Ryunosuke, who is fighting Shida. Shinpei guesses that Hizuru and Ryunosuke are already dead. Shinpei believes that if he loops now, he can still save everyone. About 30 minutes into the 9th loop, Shinpei and Shadow Mio use the sewers and manage to get in front of So and Mio and stop them. Shinpei tells them to return to Kofuna, while he and Shadow Mio go to Torajima. They reach in the time that Tokiko attacks with one of the stray, however, in an instant, Shida kills the stray shadow. Shinpei joins the fight and then sees Hizuru defeated with a spear piercing her chest. Haine sees Ushio in Shinpei's pocket and decides to retreat as they are outnumbered. Hizuru is barely alive and seeing that, Shinpei takes Tetsu's gun and wants to loop back. Hizuru tells him it's too late and Mio stops him. Hizuru pulls Shinpei and tells him that Shida's goal is different and Hizuru suspects that Haine is being used by him. Hizuru asks Shinpei to save Haine and he agrees. Before she dies, Hizuru then transfers Ryunosuke into Shinpei, telling Shinpei that she entrusts him her brother. Shadow Mio asks Shinpei what is in his pocket and Shinpei takes out the shell necklace that belonged to Ushio and believes it's a fragment of Ushio. Mio is sure that Ushio's memories are inside and she must have transferred them before she disappeared. Shinpei realizes that Ushio is coming back. Her version with no memories should appear at the beach during the festival. She then can scan the necklace and restore her memories. They realize around where Ushio's body should be. Shinpei is inside of Tokiko's stray and is heading towards Ushio in the sea. Shida and other stray are searching everywhere and find the stray that ignores them. They get close to Ushio as she starts to awaken. The stray grabs her and they fly out of the water, where Shida attacks the stray. Ushio and Shinpei start falling and Shinpei gives her the necklace, which starts to shine. Shida attacks them, but Ushio manages to recover her memories and cuts Shida's attacks. Ushio returns and attacks the shadows. Shida notices that his armor isn't recovering and realizes that Ushio had evolved again and she hacks him the moment her hair touches him. Shinpei asks Shida if he knows from where he came. As Shida isn't aware, Shinpei guesses that the handprint can't track him while he is in the stray shadow. He then places a gun on his head to restart the loop. Shinpei loops back with Ushio. As they step out of the stray, Haine realizes they are in the Haruko cave. While they head towards Haine's main body, Shinpei is sure that Haine will make them their primal target and won't kill anyone on the surface until they deal with Shinpei's group. Tokiko controls the stray and breaks part of the cave, making a wall from the debris, and tells the group to proceed without her as she stays with the stray to fight the shadow. Shinpei's group reach a black wall and Ushio realizes it's the black mud. Shinpei had made Mio copy some fireworks and calls her, stating they will be blowing up the wall. After blowing it up, the group proceeds as the wall slowly closes up. Shinpei then notices Shida and tells Nezu to get down, and they start shooting at Shida. The wall is almost closed, but Shida manages to get his head inside. Nezu tells Shinpei to proceed as he stays behind. Shinpei's group is attacked by Shida from above, but by spinning her hair, Ushio creates a barrier and protects them. Haina shows up and notices she senses Ryunosuke inside of Shinpei. Haina feels Mio behind her, but senses her and dodges, so appears on her side and shoots the nail gun at her shadow. Mio then attacks and slashes her, but Haina tries to focus to warn Shida of what will happen in the next 2 seconds. She is unable to, and Ushio punches Shida, smashing his head. However, a second Shida then comes in. Ushio heads towards Haina's main body and punches. Shida's mud armor immediately dissolves. Mio then immediately stabs him in the head, saying that if Haina dies, so will she, and then starts disappearing. Shinpei sees that Ushio's right eye turned red. Mio is still alive and states that Haina must be alive too, and that Ushio probably held herself back. Another Shida then appears. Seeing Haruko turning to a small baby, Shiga notes that he can't let Haruko die as his mud armor will disappear, and per her wish, he will take her to her home with him. He sees her eye went to Ushio and states that if he steals it, he can still achieve his wish. He then splits Haruko in half and opens a dimensional portal. Shinpei and Ushio then enter the portal, which closes after them. Shinpei wakes up in Haina's world. He decides to go looking for Ushio. He sees a ball which leads him to a group of shadows, who then disappear, and Shinpei sees Ushio in the middle. Ushio doesn't feel well and Haina comes out of her. Ryunosuke prepares to shoot, but Shinpei stops him and Ushio states she's okay now. She explains that this isn't the Haina that killed Ryunosuke, and that back then, Haina's personality split into the human girl Haina and Haruko. Ushio then explains she read Shida's mind and he wants to destroy the world and just turn it off like a game. Suddenly, an air raid starts and Ushio protects them from the bombing. Shinpei tells them that if Shida plans on taking the eye and returning to the real world, that means there is a way for them to return as well. They need to erase Shida's armor. Haina then suppresses the memory and stops time, heading up to the plains where Shida is. She jumps on his plane and slices him up, but realizes that there is no one inside of him. He attacks her, leaving only her legs and eye behind. As he reaches for the eye, Ushio eats a fragment of a child Ushio and recovers in a child form, retaking her eye. She then jumps and touches Haruko, hacking her and erasing the air raid memory. As they fall, Ushio contacts Shinpei and tells him that Shida's real body is in the real world and is controlling his armor remotely through Haruko. Ushio awakens and states she can print hacking shells for the shotgun, but it will take 2 minutes to print, and they need to survive until then. As they fight, Ryunosuke still manages to dodge Shida's attacks and eventually touches him and takes control over the armor. Without Ryunosuke, Shinpei almost passes out as he now feels all the pain that Ryunosuke was suppressing. Ushio prepares the shotgun, but in that moment, Shida isolates Ryunosuke to a piece of mud and throws him away, regaining control of his armor. Ushio manages to print herself as shells for the shotgun and tells Shinpei she is ready. He then runs towards it, and Shida attacks him. Shida is faster, is about to reach Shinpei before he reaches the shotgun. However, Haina manages to move the shotgun towards Shinpei and he grabs it. He then manages to dodge Shida and shoots him. As he gets erased, Shida in the real world panics as he is too old to move or see without the armor. Ushio turns to normal and takes Haruko, who is in pain. She tells her she will erase her pain, and as she starts erasing her, all are suddenly transferred on Hitogashima. Haina realizes this is the human world, but 300 years ago. They see a whale on the beach and the human Haina approaching it. Ryunosuke realizes that Haruko is trying to transfer her data into her past self and start all over again. Ryunosuke tries to stop the girl Haina, but goes past her. Shinpei then grabs her hand and tells her to not approach the god, which causes Haina to panic as she thinks she is seeing a ghost and runs away. Ushio then gives Haruko to Shinpei and goes to the whale. She explains she understands it now, and Haruko is telling her she needs to erase the whale Haruko or things will still play out exactly the same. Haruko cries, but as Ushio erases the whale, she calms down and disappears. Haina also starts to disappear and thanks them. Before completely disappears, Ushio explains she figured out how to transcend time. With this power, she decides to overcome the loops and redraw the summer. She then leaves the message on the phone and takes Shinpei to the boat when he arrived at Hitogashima, telling him to find her. Shinpei then wakes up, bumping into Hizuru at the boat. Shinpei then gets off the boat. He feels a deja vu that he has been recently here and wonders how he knew that Hizuru is Ryunosuke. He sees Mio coming with a bike and prepares to stop her from falling into the sea, but she uses her brakes and stops. Shinpei then wonders why he came back as he feels he was worried about them. So explains that he called him yesterday and told him that if he doesn't come, Ushio is going to beat him up. While heading to the Kofuna, Ushio sees them and rushes to punch Shinpei, but stops her fist. Shinpei then heads to the Hito shrine where he sees Karakuri, who introduces him to his son Yamato. Yamato recalls that Ushio lost her pendant on the beach the other day and have spent days searching it. At the beach, Shinpei notices the seashell pendant and Ushio is happy to get it back, explaining she lost it 2 days ago while cleaning the beach. Shinpei then puts the pendant back on her neck. Ryunosuke enters with his wife Asako and daughters Shiri and Haine. Haine greets and thanks Hizuru for the present for her birthday and notes that tomorrow is Ushio's birthday. After the festival, Shinpei heads to the beach to meet with Ushio. After buying her takoyaki as she requested, she and Shinpei remember it at the same time that he promised to buy her 10 or 100 when she was sneaking at the Shadow's only door in the old hospital. The next day, everyone celebrates Ushio's 18th birthday.